You got your Mac and Mac guys, Jody McDonald, along with my partner, John McMullen. J Mac, how are you this fine morning?
I'm doing well, Jody. I'm just in awe. That was a good opening. In flight, I like it. There's a professional, Jody McDonald.
I make it up
Love
with
it.
the best of them. All right, countdown is on. Today's show 63 of Birds 365, and we've got less than 3 weeks to the opening of training camp. And I want to start today by referencing the column that I saw on phillyvoice.com yesterday by John McMullen. It was something that we had discussed a little bit previously on the show, but I want to go even more in depth. The announcement came down for Hard Knocks on HBO this year, and will once again be the Dallas Cowboys. They have been on the show more often than any other team. No one should be surprised by that because Jerry Jones knows how to promote and promote and promote and promote so far. And more so than anyone else in the National Football League. And the bent of your article was about, did the Eagles miss out on an opportunity here? They were not obligated to do it. They had a pass because they've got a new coaching staff this year. And like or dislike Nick Sirianni, I think he's a guy with a lot of personality who would have made a fun leader of a Birds 365-driven Hard Knocks for this upcoming season. But the Eagles not only decided to take advantage of that they had an out for this year's Hard Knocks, they have never done a Hard Knocks in the existence of the show. This is their 16th season since they got underway. How much of an opportunity was missed here? I know you said in the article you couldn't find out if opting in was an option, that you could suggest, yeah, we'll do it. You could volunteer to do it.
Yeah.
You couldn't even get an answer on that. I did read one article that speculated that the Jacksonville Jaguars might be a team that would do the same thing with their new head coach and their new quarterback. They could grab some pretty good attention. How much of an opportunity did the Eagles miss out on here?
Well, none from their perspective, because they didn't even know there was an opportunity, which is kind of what I said. And by the way, that was the most interesting thing, because when you brought it up last week, Jody, that's when I kind of dove into it. And I said, yeah, that is interesting. And I contacted the league. I contacted a number of people at the league, and I said, hey, can you still opt into this thing? Or is it? And nobody knows. Nobody knows, Jody. So it's become this sort of inertia. Like, if you're not eligible by the legislation, which, as you mentioned, is rookie head coach or first-year head coach, you're out. If you made the playoffs one of the past 2 seasons, you're out. If you haven't been on the show in 10 years, you don't have to go. If you have been on the show in the past 10 years, you don't have to go on again. So those are the 3 major sort of things they put in there. Because back in 2013, that's where it started. Nobody wanted to do the show, Jody, and they had to put these things in there. But they said, we're going to force you if nobody volunteers. So that's where I got, well, can somebody volunteer now? Can somebody say, hey, Nick Sirianni came across poorly in his Zoom introductory presser, which is meaningless. I'll be the first to admit it. Doesn't matter. But he did come across poorly. That's the perception. The perception is that in around nationally, more than locally, that Jalen Hurts is sort of a placeholder. We've talked about the early mock drafts, Jody, and everybody's got the Eagles picking in the top 10. Everybody's got the Eagles picking a quarterback, which tells you 2 things. 1, they're going to stink, and 2, they're going to need a quarterback because they stunk. So my point is, you could have gotten on this show. People could have seen Nick Sirianni in a comfortable environment, which I've seen him, albeit limited, but much more comfortable. He doesn't look like a disaster in waiting. He looks like he understands what he's doing. And then you have Jalen Hurts, who comes across great to his teammates, and we talked all about that. I think it would have been great for this team in the short term. Hey, this has been a marquee team. This is what I wrote in the column, Jody. This has been a marquee team for years. They have 2 primetime games. 1 is legislated. Everybody's got to be on Thursday Night Football. And who do they get on Thursday Night Football? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady and company. The other primetime game for the Philadelphia Eagles, only 2, Dallas Cowboys, Monday night. Who are the marquee teams there? Who's carrying the Eagles? The Eagles aren't carrying Tom Brady. They're not carrying the Dallas Cowboys. This is no longer a marquee team. This was an opportunity, if it was available, which I can't even confirm, for this team to get back on the right track, back to being the marquee team that's going to be on prime time 5 or 6 times or whatever. Now, ultimately, as I also said, look, if you win, everything will take care of itself. But I just find it interesting. This is the part that bothers me, Jody, and the only part. This team craves that innovative tag. They want to be known as the innovative team. They want to be known as ahead of everybody else. And more often than not, they're just like everybody else. Only Jerry Jones runs towards Hard Knocks, the brand. Everybody else is, we can't go on that show. We can't have the boom mics. We talked to Randy Mueller about it yesterday. Oh, the competitive advantage. Come on. Think, if you want to be innovative, think innovative.
And the reason why, again, and you couldn't get a definitive answer one way or the other. So there's the possibility you could opt in if you so choose. We don't know if that's the case. We don't know if it's not the case. So you can.
Nobody wants to. So nobody knows. Nobody wants to.
Here's the reason why it bothers me in the Eagles case and with anyone else who chose to just go along with the criteria they put in place. You have final say in editing. Yep. And I know that was not the case early on, because I remember it might have been the very second year, might have been the first year, as a matter of fact. Were the Ravens the first one? They were either the first or second, and Tony
Ravens
Saragusa
were the first. Cowboys were the second. Cowboys were year 4. Cowboys were on 2 of the first 4 years.
Right.
And it became pretty clear, like, nobody wanted to do this show. And then a little bit later, they said, if we're going to save the show, we need more variety. And that's when they put the rules into place.
They did. And one of the rules that wasn't in place when HBO first started this was that you had editorial control. When I say you, I mean the NFL team. That if something was said that was recorded, that you said, no, we can't air that. That would give us a competitive disadvantage. You can't use that stuff. You have someone who's in the editing process with HBO, and you can say, yeah, no, we can't air that. I'm sorry. Hey, no matter how good you think it is, we're not allowing you to do that. It's got to be a cooperative venture between HBO and the team. But it sounds like they give you the last say. You can tell what's on the cutting room floor. So if there is something there that you think that if someone else got their hands on would actually hurt you in an upcoming game during the season, you could say, take that out. So where's the downside? You're right. It's about showcasing your team. Yeah. If you believe you're ahead of the curve and you're innovative, you've got a chance to show that on this show. So the Eagles and or anybody else, if nobody wants to do it, I can't understand why. If anything, you can use it as a vehicle to promote your team. And I think the Eagles should have done that this year. And once again, Jerry Jones has beat them to the punch. And Jeff Lurie's the guy who's going to ultimately make that call. Nick Sirianni can have an opinion. He can voice it to Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie. Even Howie Roseman could have an opinion. He could voice it to Jeff Lurie. The guy who's going to say the yay or the nay on the Hard Knocks appearance is going to be Jeff Lurie. Aren't the Cowboys the most highly valued team in the National Football League?
In the world. And forget about the NFL, in the world. So you talk about the Real Madrids and Barcelona FC and all the European super teams in soccer, what we call soccer. They're everybody. New York Yankees, they're ahead of them. It doesn't matter who you're talking about. Forget about their peers. The Dallas Cowboys are the most valued professional sports team in the world, not just the NFL. Yeah, they haven't won a Super Bowl. That's what people will bring up. You can talk about the on-field efforts and efficacy, and it hasn't been where it should have been since Jerry had a few too many gin and tonics with Jimmy Johnson. They had their divorce. That's all fair. What's also fair is to say, from a business standpoint, this guy's the most powerful owner in the league. He has been for a very long time. I think people don't realize that. And that's helpful, by the way. That's helpful. And when you talk about things coming up and over the years, a lot of the business decisions have been steered by Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft as the two most powerful owners. If you want to be innovative, Jeffrey, forget about assistant wide receiver coach. Go do something with the NFL and become as powerful as Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft. That will help the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right. But as you pointed out, and I'll further hammer the point home, if Robert Kraft is one of the most influential owners and the New England Patriots are one of the most valuable franchise, that's well understood. All they do is win Super Bowls. Now, they might have a tougher time doing it without that Brady guy, but up until this point, the last couple of decades, they have absolutely ruled the National Football League on the most important field. That's the field of play. The Cowboys haven't won, let me choose the right word, diddly in 2 decades. Yet the valuation of the franchise keeps going up and up and up and up. Wonder why? Because Jerry Jones is as good a marketer as there is in all of sports, any sports, not just the NFL, any sport. And that's why the valuation of his franchise, the value keeps going up. Why couldn't Jeffrey Lurie take a page out of Jerry Jones's book? Does he really believe they're going to give away trade secrets on Hard Knocks?
Yes. And by the way, and that's my problem. Because you asked, and again, I'll go back to this. Did the Eagles miss an opportunity? No. In their minds, there wasn't even an opportunity. They were eliminated from the pool. They're not going to make the extra call. They're not going to volunteer. They're going to say, we're not up for this. So we don't have to make that decision. So from their standpoint, there was no lost opportunity. And I get that. From my standpoint, it is you have to understand where you are as a franchise, that you are so lightly regarded from a national perspective because of what has gone on. And this was an opportunity to change that right away and say, we're not a disaster. We're not a dysfunction. Look, we're on HBO. You can see us every day. It's not the way they think. They think like everybody else. And to me, and again, I bring up Randy from yesterday, Randy Mueller, everything's CIA-like, everything's NSA-like, everything's competitive, but we can't show this. I'll give you a story, Jody. Last year, Jason Peters was set to come back from one of his injuries. I think it was a knee injury. He was going to go back at left tackle. Everybody knew it. Everybody around the league knew it. In practice, under Doug Peterson, they would have something called Wednesday installs. And every time they would install a couple gimmick plays that might be used for the next game. We weren't allowed to report on that. We were clearly told you can't report on what you're seeing here. There was a jet sweep to Adrian Killens that ended up losing 13 yards when they ran it. But anyway, it was understood. Now, somebody made a mistake and said Jason Peters was lining up at left tackle in install with the first team. Everybody knew it anyway. But the Eagles are like, oh, you can't do that. And they shut us out of install for the rest of the season. That's how secretive and CIA-like and NSA-like that this, not only the Eagles, every team in this league is. And it's absurd. Everybody in the NFL knew Jason Peters was going to play left tackle before it was reported. And by the way, nobody cared because he wasn't playing well.
Right.
The opposition. What are you doing? What is this nonsense? And that's where it all comes down to. And that's where I think when I talk about groupthink and the Eagles and they want to have this innovative tack, well, then think differently than everybody else if you want to be innovative. Don't get in a corner with everybody else and say, get those damn boom mics away from us.
What week was this that they shut you out of install Wednesday? Do you remember?
I don't remember offhand. It was the week Jason Peters was probably week 10, 11, somewhere in that range.
Okay,
so they were having a bad season. That was part of it as well.
After the second half of the season, but still with some significant games left. You're right. They're paranoid, and they're not alone in that. I don't want to put that on Jeff Lurie's plate that, oh, my God, the Eagles are the only team that thinks everyone.
No, everybody is, but that's right. The point, Jody.
They're
just like everybody else.
It's across the board in the National Football League, but it doesn't mean that you can't take advantage when an opportunity presents itself. I know you said you couldn't get it confirmed, but at least my reading of the situation is when they went to these disqualifications in 2013, it was because Roger Goodell was having issues. He was going to teams and saying, "Do you want to be on Hard Knocks?" And it was just no across the board. So he had to come up with ways for you to be able to say no. And if there was a group that weren't in that group of disqualification, then he's going to bring the hammer down. And he's going to force you to do HBO. And yeah, this year they had 5 teams that weren't quote unquote disqualified from doing Hard Knocks. The Eagles were not among them because they had a new coach and because they were in the playoffs within the last 2 years. But to me, that doesn't take out the fact that anyone who wants can volunteer to do this. And the Eagles, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other teams, opted out and said, no, I'm not volunteering. I'm just saying I think they should have done it this year because they are a team in transition. Didn't the owner say that, as a matter of fact? Didn't he use the word transition on the day that he hired Doug Peterson? Well, that could make for a good story, a good narrative, a good broadcast. And oh, by the way, maybe you could find some new fans out there. The last time I remember the Eagles playing the underdog card was after they beat the Atlanta Falcons on their field in the first round of the 2017 playoffs. The next week, they did what they did to the Minnesota Vikings, and 2 weeks later, they did what they did to the New England Patriots, and they got to wear their dog masks proudly. Well, coming into this season, whether they want to admit it or not, and I think calling yourself a transition team kind of admits it, they're an underdog, and they could play the underdog role. And Nick Sirianni could use that in meetings with his players to try and pump them up and motivate them. Well, what better way to do it than on a national stage? As John McMullen just pointed out, they're not getting a national stage this year. They got all of 2 primetime games. So why not take advantage of a national stage, hop on HBO, be the Hard Knock squad of 2021? Yes, I will continue to beat the drum that the Eagles missed out on an opportunity. And just the fact that it's the Cowboys who are doing it again just makes it that much more difficult. Well, remember,
I will say the Cowboys were eligible, but they don't want the Cowboys because they want somebody else. They want different.
Fresh blood, yeah.
Yeah, they want fresh blood. So I would say, Jody, that show will be canceled before any NFL team other than the Dallas Cowboys volunteers for it. I will say that. Nobody's volunteering. Nobody is stepping up and picking up the phone and saying, hey, Roger, don't worry about the rules. We're going to do this for you. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's doing it. And you're right, this year, you talk about the underdogs. The underdog thing, the underdog mass thing, and I've said this forever, is a bunch of bull you-know-what, Jody.
What are you talking about?
There was only one reason the Eagles would have been favored against Atlanta, Minnesota, maybe not New England, if Carson Wentz didn't get hurt. They were a really good team who happened to lose their quarterback and became an underdog because of that. They are underdogs now because everybody thinks they stink. There is a big difference between those two things. They would have been favored against everybody with the and they might have been favored, to tell you the truth, against New England. If Carson Wentz continued to play well, they probably would have been favored. That underdog crap was crap. And during that run, they were a really good football team. The underdog stuff now, they're underdogs. They're underdogs because people think they stink.
Well, if it comes down to what people think, the most important people in labeling an underdog are all the wagering outlets.
But you
were actually underdogs in those games.
Literally, but you can read, correct. Am I correct or incorrect? You tell me. If Carson Wentz doesn't get hurt, are they favored over the Atlanta Falcons?
Probably, yes.
Probably.
Yeah.
At Lincoln Financial Field? Probably.
Well, here's the one thing we don't know. Was Carson in those last 4 regular season games going to play?
Could have been worse than Nick Foles. But people forget Nick Foles was awful.
Yeah, Nick really wasn't.
Of the regular season.
He really wasn't all that good until the playoffs actually started. You were correct about that.
He wasn't not good. He was awful. and everybody was panic stricken. That's the reason they were underdogs. Same thing with Minnesota. Minnesota had a good team, but if Carson Wentz is healthy, the games at Lincoln Financial Field, they're favorite. Come on, Jody, you've been around for a long time.
I get that. I get that, John. But in the locker room, when you're making those speeches, and you can hear it on the radio, on television, read it everywhere, you're an underdog. You're an underdog. You're an underdog. That's the reality of it. They were underdogs, and no one will ever know how much mentally it lifted them, how much they leaned on that, how much motivation they got from it. That's part, just the way it shook out.
I give Doug Peterson all the credit in the world for using that and manipulating people and using that to get people. They believed it. I'm just telling you, it was crap. And he knew it was crap too. Doug knew it was crap. He used it. And God bless him. He did a great job with it.
Well, and I would have liked to see the Eagles use it coming out of the gate this year, but it's not going to be used on Hard Knocks. All right, we'll continue the Birds conversation because we've got a outstanding Birds reporter. He's been doing it for years for KYW and WIP. Ed Benkin joins us next here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.